it's a baby boom here. But the parents are all at home either working or taking care of their kids. But anyhow, sort of like they say, sure do things that get the taxes, which is money and healthcare. And I just would like each of you to address the fact that your government gave $850 million under the table to the BC Nurses Union. This was discovered through a Freedom of Information Act inquiry. You can't give money to the people you're negotiating with. So are you going to get that money back, stop giving it, and rehire the nurses, rehire the healthcare professionals, which is well over $10,000, 10,000 people, well over 10,000 people that are no longer here. Nobody has been rehired. And actually, when you rescinded the mandates, they were then, as Sean said, applied to the license, which meant that everybody working privately now has to, the mandates now apply to them. You're going to lose more healthcare professionals. This is the crimes against humanity. I watched this community fall apart due to your government's bullshit.
Okay, we need to limit.
So I want you to answer the question, will you get that money back? And will you rehire the tens of thousands of people?
I'll just give it 1 second before we answer the question. We need to stay respectful the way we talk. I know this is an emotional topic probably, but let's choose our words wisely and let it go. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate the question, and I can see it's a really emotional issue for you. I'd be happy to talk more later as well. There's two. I'll try to address in 1 minute the two questions there. You started talking about childcare. I will say, I need to flag. I was expecting some questions around that too. I think it's been remarkable what we've managed to do in terms of reducing the cost of childcare. So on average across the province, in the last 4 years, we managed to bring that down by about 50%. That unlocks again back to a bunch of economic potential. I won't go on about that. I also heard, I think you talked about the vaccine mandates, right? And you're talking about for healthcare specifically. My background is in science, right? I believe in climate science. I believe in medical science, right? I understand there were challenges. We went through that process. My question for Adrian Dix regularly, when I sat down with him, was, I just need to know that we were doing the work because we trusted our navigation of a pandemic to medical experts. That was not the case around the world. We did better in terms of our economic outcomes than everybody else, and we did better in a lot of those social outcomes that we're looking at. But what you're asking is about the mandates, and my question to Adrian was, just reassure me that we are going through a process regularly to say, do the benefits of this mandate, this restriction on people in our healthcare system match the value of what it, or the cost of what it's incurring? I have more, but
can I say something? So I come from a PsyOps background in the military. That's what I did in Afghanistan. And when I saw the deceptive practices that were being used by our government and the media to push forth a narrative, I addressed them within the proper chains of command. I went to Chief of Staff at the Kelowna General. I talked with nursing managers, all on deaf ears. And I spoke out against what I was seeing within our healthcare system during the last federal election. 5 days after the election, I was fired. A month after that, the mandates came in and they took out thousands of healthcare workers and shut down our healthcare system. Okay? You're right when you say it's crimes against humanity. That's why I'm here. What has been done? I saw firsthand the lives that were destroyed by these mandates. And the deception that was used, it's unconscionable. People are starting to figure this out. We've seen a stratospheric rise in all-cause mortality. We've seen surgical programs closed. We've seen hospitals closed. We've seen all these things. What has the College of Nurses and Midwives done? They've spent the last 4 years dragging me through the mud, calling me medical disinformation spreader and a racist. We're waiting almost a year for a verdict because their own evidence corroborated what I said. Look into this.
question directed to one candidate, everybody's free to answer. You can direct it to everybody or just one person, but everybody has the stage if they want to add something, but they don't have to.
I'm just a troublemaker.
You're on.
Good.
It's
Yeah.
on.
Anyway, gentlemen, throughout the night I've heard different references to the carbon tax. No one once mentioned that the carbon tax from the farm could be generated 4 different or more times as it goes through the process. The farmer pays carbon tax for his fuel, the next person pays carbon tax for whatever they have to handle with, whatever and anything. Anyways, my biggest concern with this province is education and healthcare. The carbon tax that was put to the proper use, this is only my feeling, taken and hired first-line people like paramedics, nurses, doctors, and teachers. Increase their wages where they can afford to live in this so-called beautiful province, and let's get the healthcare and teach and education back on track.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate the question. Again, I see there's kind of 2 parts to that. One is around carbon tax. One is around what I refer to as kind of rural retention incentives, right? Opportunities to help make sure that people in rural communities are getting the support that they need, because it costs more, frankly, if you're a paramedic, if you're a nurse, if you operate in a rural community typically. And so to answer that one first, that is what we're doing, not with carbon tax revenue, but with other revenues to be able to say, so SOGH, the hospital in Oliver, the nurses said we need some kind of support for our nurses here to be able to recognize the challenges of operating in a rural place. We got that. I fought for that. We got that rural retention for that hospital. And by getting it there, it means we have it for all the hospitals, all the healthcare operations across the Similkameen and South Okanagan and Boundary now. We do that. We have invested in terms of rural ambulances. We do have increased investment to support those operators. And the first part of your question was around something. Now I've lost my train of thought. The carbon tax in terms of reinvestment there. I think we've seen clearly. You look at Princeton. You look at the atmospheric rivers. You look at what almost happened here in 2021. You look at what happened in the boundary in 2018. We've seen how much it costs if we ignore climate change. It is enormous, and we cannot afford, as a province, we cannot afford to ignore it. So we have to take action. It's figuring out how do we do that in an effective way.
It's not our fault. They don't want to work here because of Bill 36, right? Attracting nurses and doctors. And I encourage you to read it. I'm a former nurse and a paramedic, right? Like, I talk with people, and I see a lot of my friends that were fired. They're going to different jurisdictions. They're going to the States. They're going to Alberta. They're going everywhere else. They don't want to be here working under the framework that's been set up, you know? And further to your comments, I wonder how many nurses they could have hired with the hundreds of millions of dollars that they gave the union to fire us. The BC Nurses Union took more money from the government than they did from their own membership. He who pays the piper calls the tune.
Well, I'm Donna Stalker from Coston, and I'm really disappointed that the Conservative candidate isn't here because I have a question for you. I just came back from 100 Mile House a couple of hours ago, came straight here, and I was walking past the Conservative office. There's a big flag, 2 big Canadian flags, says Freedom Convoy over one, and above that in letters this big across both doors it said F. Trudeau. The real word, the whole word. Trudeau. So I wanted to know how many people here are going to vote Conservative. Is this their policy? Are they allowing their candidates to carry on like that? I think it's appalling. That's all I have to say, and I would have asked him if he condoned that kind of behavior. I think it's a mistake. So, that's all.
If I can, I'm not running for the Conservatives, I'm running for the Greens. And I'm proud to believe in collaborative politics and decision-making and respectful discussion. And I think that government and opposition have a very important role to play, each, in choosing a direction and a vision, and then holding the other to account to make sure that the process is transparent and that all of us can have confidence in our government. What we're experiencing over the last number of years, not just within British Columbia or Canada or North America, but globally through COVID and through economic pressures thereafter, I think is a crisis of trust in our institutions. It's almost like choose your own facts. And that's a dangerous situation where we cease to be able to listen to each other. I find it very discouraging to see flags that say F. Trudeau, not because I'm a great enthusiast of everything that he's done, but because I think it undermines our civility and that opportunity for dialogue and that model at the highest level of our country to listen to one another, to dig into our differences, because this process makes me less cynical, even though we have different viewpoints, clearly. I sincerely believe that each of these candidates really cares. Thank you. I do really appreciate that answer, and then, what I was going to say is, to the same point, is, you know, the work of being an MLA is not about seeding division and fear and polarization. It is to go and work with colleagues to broker better solutions for our communities. And that happens across the aisle. I have colleagues, I have like Coralie Oakes, she's a liberal, BC Liberal from the Keremeos. We sat on the agricultural committee together. We helped navigate the system in a good place because she cared about it and I cared about it, and we could do that. It doesn't work. That system doesn't work if there is not that trust and good relationships. That is how we navigate for a better solution and a better outcome for British Columbia. And that's supposed to be what this is all about. So I appreciate your comments.
I kind of like Justin Trudeau. I think he's the best guy we've ever had. Canadians need it obvious right now, and if he's one thing, he's obvious. I'm of the opinion we'll know them by their fruits. Okay? I know why Donald's not here tonight. I've been involved in the Conservative Party since 2019, and all the people that have been fighting and trying to expose what's been going on for the last 4 years have been systematically removed from the Conservative Party and replaced with, well, they just released a bunch of Liberals back into the wild, and we got a lot of them. When I look, yeah, Dr. Stephen Malthouse, Dr. Stephen Pellett, Corinne Morey, who exposed the corruption with the unions, myself, Roger Harrington in Penticton, Summerland, Rachel Weber, Alexandra Wright, Jan Webb. There's been a lot of people that have been trying to show what has been going on behind the scenes, and they've been systematically removed, right? I see a power structure trying to cling on to what it's got. We've got what? Just spitballing about 1,800 people in legislatures in the House of Commons across this nation. How many stood up loud and proud and fought for you during the mandates?
None.
One. Randy Hilliard. And they're still trying to put his ass in jail. You need people that are fighting for you. And they're desperately trying to keep us out. We're seeing this rise. Like, I'm extremely hopeful.
I agree with some of what you said, but it needs to be done with civility and respect, or we lose the nation, and we lose the communities.
Have I
But
been
I also
disrespectful, Ann?
I have a question for you alone, just one question.
Okay.
You've systematically referred to hospitals closing. I was alive and very fortunately well during COVID. Many of my friends weren't quite so lucky. Every one of them got the hospital treatment they needed. And most of them survived. A couple died. They survived because of the treatment they received. I would like you to tell me which hospital, where, closed. I realize that the emergencies in some hospitals are closed at certain times because of a lack of doctors. I understand all that, but I'd like you to tell me, back up what you have said, and tell me which hospital actually closed.
So the
I mean closed. I don't mean a temporary closure because there isn't a doctor for that duty.
Can I speak? So Grand Forks Hospital closed inpatient services. So when you're sick, like if you come in and you're acutely ill and we would admit you to the hospital, we couldn't do that anymore because they closed all the inpatient beds, right? And then we'd send you to Fernie, Trail, Kelowna, wherever. And that was over for 2 years. They're starting to reopen now. We kept the emergency open and ran it like an emergent care center, right? They still ran the cardiac clinic, the cancer clinic, stuff like that. But inpatient services was closed. We've seen a major degradation. I don't know, they released the stats of how many people have died on the waiting list over the last couple of years. Surgical programs have been closed or severely reduced, right? And you'll have units closed. So like ICU capacities, they will close sections of units, right? So it's always a moving target. But there were facilities that were closed and there's programs that are closed. How could you not? You fired thousands of healthcare workers on in a system that was already desperately short-staffed.
Well, thank you for your answer. And I would suggest that rather than saying hospitals closed, state the fact that certain departments closed, because saying hospitals closed is misleading and open to misinterpretation. Thank you.
Okay.
I thought you said that the whole hospital closed. I must have misunderstood. Anyways, the carbon tax, the carbon tax. Okay, it was supported by the NDP and supported by the Green, which support the NDP, which support the Liberals. No question about it. I think we all know that's a fact. Right? Simple things like the NDP came, they had a referendum on simple things like time change. Big referendum. 85% of the people in British Columbia did not want the time change. Yet what are we doing? We're having another time change. Yay! Referendums. Why are we even talking? Nobody listens.
You know, we've been talking about the carbon tax a lot tonight. Remember when Justin Trudeau said we don't have to worry about the budgets, they balance themselves? Right? And everyone laughed. Well, he wasn't entirely wrong. When you control the printing presses, the budgets balance themselves, right? Because you just print up the difference. And this is the most vicious tax that all we face. You look at the amount of printing, and not just here in Canada, but across the world. And this is an invisible tax. By the devaluation of our currency, it pulls it right out of your bank account. So $10 only buys you $8 worth of stuff. And no one's talking about that, because we don't teach monetary policy in our schools. Right? We've got better things to talk about, I guess. But I think that's the tax that everyone should be really concerned with, because they're spending like drunken sailors, and they just keep running the presses 24/7.
The numbers there are wrong, but we can talk about that later if you want. I think there's a couple kind of comments that I'd like to make there. One of which is around carbon tax. One of which is kind of embedded in that question is, I think, around, like, for me, is how are we going to fix these problems? So we're talking about all sorts of problems we have. How are we going to fix them? And so on the carbon tax side of things, if my time in government does not last in some kind of durable change for the better for our communities, then I shouldn't be there, right? We shouldn't be there if we're not helping communities in a lasting way. Carbon tax we led the world in some ways around the carbon tax, but it had become a challenge, right? It became a challenge, a barrier to climate action around the product, and we know how important that is. Again, look at the state of the world right now. We know we have to do more there, and we're not going to let up on that, but we've got to focus on how to do that in an effective way that brings communities along with us to deliver the change that we need, to protect our communities, to keep people safe, and to make sure that my kids, for example, still have jobs that they want to take in the forest sector, whatever that is, and they live in secure communities. So I wish there was more time, but there's not. And similarly, I would say, again, I do wish the Conservative candidate was here, because we're hearing challenges around the healthcare system. I lived in the States long enough to know what a privatized healthcare system does to communities. And that's enough.
Yeah. With respect to climate change, we have to adapt. It's not optional. The costs of not getting out in front of things will just keep building. And for young people, like, I don't know where the extra money is meant to come from. Things are already very tight. And then when you have a disaster, we're in big trouble. Florida is about to get the second big hit with the storm right now. Carbon tax, one thing that I maybe sympathize with is what we're asking for. I think what's really required is a change of behavior. And the carbon tax, the Green support, and I support, you have to ask the question, what's the alternative? If we don't do it, what else do we do? And on CBC, there's good discussion. So most economists agree it's the lowest hanging fruit, it's the most cost effective, easiest to implement, it's a great start, but it's imperfect. If we don't do carbon tax, what else are we doing? With respect to behavior, you get more money back in your pocket, but I still have to fuel up my car. It doesn't change my behavior. And so free transit, investing in communities, seeing that tax revenue generated from the big polluters, from oil and gas, and come back to communities, I think is what's really important. So we can see how that money is preparing us for the future in a tangible way, paying for things like free transit for everyone is a generational shift in our mode of transit.
Curious, 2 seconds. Rolly just said my number.